Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to Utility Sports. I'm really excited to bring my Eastern Conference predictions for all 15 teams in the East. And this is not your father's or your grandfather's Eastern Conference. In fact, this Eastern Conference is perhaps the strongest of my lifetime and one of the best Eastern Conferences potentially in NBA history when you look at how deep it is, how talented the top teams are, and even how talented some of the teams that are going to miss the playoffs this year are. Again, this is going to be a video that talks about the standings, the way that I look at them for the regular season. This does not mean the team that ends up number one is my favorite to win the Eastern Conference, although potentially it could be. I'll talk about that when we get there. And secondly, if you are someone who wants to hear a bunch of people say the same thing and you want to hear everyone have the same consensus ideas, this is not the channel for you. I do not operate off of consensus. I do not care what any quote unquote expert on TV says. I don't care what your favorite YouTuber says. I am going to give my own honest opinions and thoughts. And if you disagree with them, I'd love to hear your rationale and your reasoning. But I don't want to hear, oh, well, everyone else disagrees with you, so you're wrong. Because to be honest, I hear a lot of that, which is just funny to me. I don't know why people want to hear a bunch of perspectives if the perspectives are all saying the same thing. I don't understand that logic. And for me, I'm really excited to bring my own analysis and opinions here. And a lot of the times I end up being right. I'm not going to lie. Not every time. I've been wrong plenty of times in the past. But I'm just saying, if you guys want to enjoy this content, just make sure you understand that I'm not going to say everything that your favorite YouTuber or analyst does, because I am my own person and I do not need other people's thoughts to think for myself. That being said, at number 15, let's get into the worst team in the Eastern Conference. And I think there's really two options at this point. It could depend on how the season really plays out, but the team for me that I really prefer to put at 15 is still Orlando. They had the first overall pick this year, drafted Paolo Banchero, who I really like his game. I had him number 4 in the class, but he was really my 2C type of player. I thought, hey, there's a clear number 1 player, and then there was a bunch of players, 3 of them to be exact, that were kind of fighting for that second spot in this draft class. And I think Paolo Banchero, I think long-term, probably the worst of the 3, but it's not that he's bad. I think he's probably the favorite to win Rookie of the Year. I think he's an awesome talent. And I think Orlando, they're going to see a lot of positive signs from him. The one issue, though, is this Eastern Conference is going to be really tough to win with a rookie doing a ton of the ball handling, a ton of the scoring. There's just so many expectations on him, which I think is going to be good for his long-term development, but it's not going to be good for year 1 wins for Orlando, which is perfectly fine. Maybe they get a shot at Victor Wembanyama or Scoot Henderson in this draft, and then that's really where they build their franchise. Even if they don't get a top 2 pick, someone like Nick Smith Jr., or a few of the other players in this draft as well. You could look at a guy like Keontae George, maybe Anthony Black, even a little bit later than that. There's some great options out there in this draft that I think could really help Orlando long term. And I think even if they are the worst team in the East by record this year, it will not be a lost season for them going into the second year with Jamal Mosley as head coach. Then at 14, the team that I think is going to battle them out for maybe being the worst team in the Eastern Conference this year is Indiana. I just don't really love what the Pacers have on this roster as of right now in terms of winning games this year. Again, I really like the Benedict Mathurin selection. If you've been watching the channel, you know I've had Benedict Mathurin as the top 6 prospect the entire duration of the draft season this past year. I love his game. I think he's a very athletic wing. I think he's a Tim Hardaway Jr. blend with a guy like Mikal Bridges. That's a really great player to be a blend of. You get some really good defensive moments like you see from Mikal Bridges, but you also get some really great offensive moments that I think Bridges could probably play into in a different system, but we've seen Tim Hardaway Jr. provide those moments on his own right when playing in New York or Dallas or Atlanta even to some extent. I think he's a very talented player, and playing next to Tyrese Halliburton, it's about seeing more development there. Had they gotten 8, maybe we'd see this team be a little bit more competitive this year. But of course, he's staying back in Phoenix. Indiana, probably not going to win a ton this year. Again, not the worst thing for them. I think one big thing to watch is, will they trade Miles Turner? Will they trade Buddy Hield this year? If they do, they could maybe slip below Orlando down to that 15th spot. But this could be another really great opportunity. Indiana, they just had their first draft in the top 9 since 1989. And I think here maybe we could see them even get into the top 3 or 4. And if they do, this could be a really good opportunity for them to add even more talent. Maybe a guy like Dariq Whitehead out of Duke, who is a phenomenal shooter. Imagine that trio there of Tyrese Halliburton, Dariq Whitehead and Benedict Mathurin. I mean, that would be so much fun to watch. 13th now, this is where it starts to get really tough because you look at the teams left, and there's not a lot of bad teams left out here to choose from. For me, I know this is going to be a shock to a lot of my viewers. I'm going to put Detroit here, and you guys know how much I love Detroit's offseason. I think Detroit killed it in the draft. I think that they did a really great job getting Bojan Bogdanovic. This Eastern Conference is really tough, though. In a typical year for the Eastern Conference, the last 5-10 years or so, this Pistons team probably would be able to maybe slip into the 8 or 9 seed. This year, I just don't see that happening. I think they're a 13 seed. Now, Cade Cunningham, I do project he's going to have a massive increase in production this year, probably up to 21, 22 points a game, probably close to 7 or 8 assists a game. He's going to be awesome. I think that Jaden Ivey's going to show a ton of flashes that really make you believe that he and Cade are the backcourt of the future. I like Jalen Duren from a potential perspective. But again, at this point, they're just a couple, years of development away from becoming really what I think this team can be, which is maybe a real contender. And I'm not saying that lightly. I think a real finals contender, maybe 3, 4, 5 years from now. But at this point, it's just a little premature for me. I think that I like the veterans they have in Alec Burks, in Bojan Bogdanovic now, in Nerlens Noel. I think it's going to help these young guys develop, learn in game situations. You're going to have more competitive basketball. I think they're going to be a good 13 seed. And I know those two things sound really contradictory. This NBA season is going to be nuts. There's so much talent. There's a lot of parity. And I think the Pistons are going to be an example of that here. Just not having the record that you would hope for them, but they're going to be much improved from where they were even a year ago. Now at 12, there's 2 teams at this spot I would consider. I would look at the New York Knicks and the Washington Wizards. And for me, I kind of vary back and forth. The Knicks, I really like the Jalen Brunson addition. I know a lot of people freaked out about the money. They did pay him a lot, but he's a really good player. And the Wizards, well, they have Kristaps Porzingis. So you basically have the 2 Dallas Mavericks castaways here battling it out for the 11 and 12 seed, in my opinion. I'm going to put the Knicks at 12 and the Wizards at 11 here. And my rationale for this here is I think that Bradley Beal's the best player between the 2 teams. And I think there's an argument to be had that Kristaps Porzingis is still the second best player between the 2 teams. Washington's got a little bit more star power. Now, I think New York's got maybe a better roster fit in certain ways. I like RJ Barrett a lot. I think Randall's okay in his role. I think that, obviously Mitchell Robinson was a really good keep for New York. These 2 teams are going to be very close. I wouldn't be surprised if they're separated by 1 game, by the end of the year. I could see Washington being 12. I could see New York being 11. Just in this video, I have to put one somewhere in another place. I think that the Knicks, I just favor them a little bit less than Washington. But again, with injuries, who knows how this is really going to shake out. I mean, I could see either of these teams slipping into the play-in if other teams above them aren't healthy, which could help them move a long way going even further. Now at 10, I think the team that becomes pretty obvious here is Charlotte. They took a step back in the offseason. Miles Bridges, of course, is a terrible human with his actions. No justification for what he's done. I don't want to get too much into it. But from a basketball perspective, they're worse without him. Obviously, I don't want to defend him, but he was a very good basketball player for them. And I think that they are going to miss him to a certain extent. But I still think that they have enough talent to stay in that play-in race. Again, this is probably a narrow lead over New York and Washington, maybe 1 or 2 games that separates the 10 and maybe even the 12 seed. We could see this being a really tight race between all 3 of these teams, and heck, maybe even 4 of these teams if Detroit clicks right away, which there's a chance that they could, and maybe be right in the heels of that race as well. For me, Charlotte, LaMelo Ball is one of the players that elevates them. I still do really like them getting Mark Williams as well. I think he solves a lot of their deficiencies that they had. And the one thing about Charlotte last year, they were deep, so they're going to be able to fill that small forward spot a little bit better than most teams could. Now, they did still lose one of their top talents, so it's not like it's an easy fill, but they can fill it better than some other teams, I think, theoretically could. We'll see how Steve Clifford does in his second tenure back in Charlotte. I don't necessarily think that was the right hire, but I'm hoping that there's at least stability there. And with stability comes potential good play. And I think Charlotte is at a spot where if that stability is in place, if LaMelo Ball can learn a little bit more and improve his game just another step, like I'm expecting going into year 3 of his career, we see a ton of young players take that step in year 3. He could become a really, really good player, someone who's all-star caliber and could really elevate where the Hornets are this season. Now at 9, you look at the teams left. This is my point here with how good the Eastern Conference is. I don't want to make a pick here because all of these teams to me feel like they should be locks to be the playoff teams. And when I'm putting them ninth, I'm essentially saying that I don't think this team's going to make the playoffs this year, at least based off of standings. Obviously, the play-in could, play into this and move stuff around. And I hate to do it. Chicago fans, I'm sorry. I'm putting the Bulls ninth. And it's not because I don't believe in this team. And there's a good argument to be had that, hey, the Bulls were the 1 seed last year before they had all their injuries. That's part of the reason why I have them ninth and not in the top 8 here, is I'm just worried about the injuries. Lonzo Ball says he's still not running or jumping, which is a really major red flag for me. I think he's a really vital part to that roster. Now, I would assume he really did step up last year. I like his game. If Alex Caruso can stay healthy, he's one of the more underrated players in the league. Obviously, got a lot of love and hype on the Lakers, but he was so phenomenal last year for the Bulls as a perimeter defender. DeMar DeRozan, we know what he is, all-NBA guy last year. Zach LaVine, all-star caliber guy. One concern I have, Nikola Vucevic. I didn't like that trade when they made it for sending out Wendell Carter and 2 first-round picks. They still owe a first-round pick this year to the Orlando Magic from that trade, which does not look good to me, especially with Vucevic heading into a contract year. I just don't really love where the Bulls are at in terms of their center position. Now, if they are higher than this, I think it's going to be because of Patrick Williams. He's a phenomenal young player. I got to see him live a couple times in person last year. He looked really, really good toward the end of the season when he finally came back from that injury. And I think that if they are higher, Patrick Williams is going to have a big, point of that. I think he's going to be a big part of that team in maybe accomplishing where they want to go. Again, this is a really good team. I think, and this, I'm going to say this, and I hope everyone's listening because I said this in the last video for the Western Conference predictions, and people just don't seem to listen sometimes. You know who I'm talking about. I think that the Bulls could win 40 plus games. I think that there could be 5, 6, 7 teams that win 48 plus games. I'm not saying that these teams are bad. I just am ranking them amongst each other, and I don't prefer the Bulls as much as I do some of these other teams. In a normal year, the Bulls are probably a 4 or 5 seed. The East right now, though, is a beast, and it's going to be tough to make the playoffs. It's just the honest truth, and right now I just have a little bit of a knock against the Bulls because they're going into the season not healthy, whereas most teams are. I hope that's understandable. Then at 8, again, this is another beast of a pick here. Who are you going to go with? I love Atlanta's additions. And because of that, I'm going to put Brooklyn 8th. And I know people are going to be really upset and, they're going to be out of their mind. Here's some facts. Kevin Durant doesn't play 70 plus games a year anymore. He's going to miss 15 to 20 games, and Brooklyn in those games probably isn't going to be that good. Ben Simmons still is afraid to shoot free throws. In his preseason game against the Sixers, he went 0 for 2. He just doesn't really assert a ton of pressure on the rim like you think someone who's a 6'9" point guard could. That's just the honest facts. He doesn't have as great of a handle as a lot of people seem to assume. What he's really good at is taking advantage of advantageous situations, whether that's transition, 4-on-3 in the half court, 3-on-2. He's going to finish pretty much all of those plays, whether that's as a facilitator or as a finisher. But when you're in a half court set 5-on-5 offense, that's where things start to kind of muck up a little bit. That's why we've seen issues with him in the postseason before. Throughout the regular season, it's a little less obvious, but he is coming off of a year where he didn't play at all. I think he's going to have to work himself back into shape. Kyrie Irving, who knows if he's going to be with this team. Part of the reason why I have Brooklyn at 8, there's just a lot of questions and concerns about availability, reliability, consistency, and the such. They also go into the year with Seth Curry injured right now, which, again, I don't think Seth Curry's quite the player of Lonzo Ball, but he's a very important player still for this team in terms of spacing around a guy like Ben Simmons and just, holding gravity out on the court, out to the perimeter. I still think that he would be an important piece for them. Definitely a top 7 guy in their rotation. So Brooklyn not having him does hurt them a little bit for me. I still think they're a very good team. You have Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, Ben Simmons. You are a very good team. So again, no slight here to Brooklyn. Last year we saw them as a 7 seed. I still think there's a lot of those same questions there. And if Kevin Durant misses expansive time, we're going to see that be an issue again this season. Now at the 7 seed, again, these options don't get easier here. I think I'm going to have to opt for Atlanta here, although I do really like Atlanta's talent again. Having Atlanta as a playing team just does not feel right to me, but amongst the choices, that's who I prefer here at this spot. Trae Young is a bona fide superstar. If you disagree with that, you need to watch him a little bit closer. He's one of the best pick and roll ball handlers in the league. He's very adept at fitting the ball in tight windows. phenomenal lob passer as well. And I think one area where he's really grown since coming into the league from Oklahoma is reading the whole floor, especially the opposite side of the floor when making some of those decisions. He's gotten much, much better at that in his career, which has helped him limit some of the turnovers that we saw at Oklahoma. And obviously he's got out of the gym range. He can shoot basically once he pulls up in the team bus, which there's not a lot of players like that. And I think Atlanta really addressed a lot of their deficiencies this offseason as well, bringing DeJounte Murray, a player who I really love, capable of averaging 28 and 8. We saw it last year, first-time All-Star with the San Antonio Spurs. Maybe were those numbers inflated a little bit because he was asked to do a lot? Yes, but that team made the play-in. I saw someone say that team was a bad team. Based on their record, they weren't great. They were a play-in team, though, and that's really all you could ask from San Antonio, a team that's probably going to be one of the worst teams in the league this year. The reason that they're going to be so bad is they don't have DeJounte Murray anymore. Atlanta does, and they're going to reap the benefits of that. I could see this team maybe moving as high as 4 or 5. Again, I want to make this clear. Please listen to this part. Please. I think the difference between maybe the 8th or 7th seed and say the 4th seed or even the 3rd seed in some cases could maybe be 4 or 5 games, which means 2 or 3 head-to-head matchups can really shake the course of the season. Would I be shocked if Atlanta and Brooklyn are both in the top 6? No, I would not. But again, for the sake of this video, I have to put teams in specific order, and I just trust these teams a little bit less for Atlanta's sake. I still have concerns about Trae Young defensively, even though I think DeJounte does help with a lot of those things. And the one thing I'm concerned about as well, will Clint Capella be healthy? What does Onyeka Okongwu look like this year? I really do like Onyeka and his overall game, but clearly they're not going to play him with Clint, which is going to, limit his overall minutes. And then John Collins. Will there ever be a John Collins trade? I just hope that this team clicks, and I think that's very possible that they could. Again, I think being a 7 seed this year is a very good thing to be and shows a lot of talent on this roster. And the one thing is, once you get into the playoffs, it's going to be a bloodbath series, right? Atlanta could really go deep in the postseason, even being a 7 seed. Now, I know that's an uphill battle at that point, but if the matchups play right and Trae Young really showcases what he can do, they could definitely advance out of the first round. Now, as we look at the 6th seed here, again, from our options, there's not a lot of teams that I would love to nominate as only being a 6 seed. Look at these teams. I mean, these teams are very tough to rank. I think there's a clear favorite in here, but I'm going to put Cleveland here now at 6. And for the Cavaliers, part of the reason they're only at 6 is they're still very young, right? Donovan Mitchell is one of the older players on their roster at 26 years old. Obviously, they still have Kevin Love, Darius Garland. They've got to, he's going into now year 4 of his career. But the Cavaliers are a team that I think, when you look at them on paper, I think the one question mark I have is that wing position. Small forward. I would love to see them make a Jay Crowder trade. I really, really think that they should. We do have a Jay Crowder trade video up on the channel. I recommend you go check it out. It does talk about the Cavaliers in there as well. And if they had a better starting small forward at this point, I would trust them so much more. I love Evan Mobley. I think he's one of the most versatile big men the league's maybe ever seen. And I know that's very high praise for a guy who just finished his rookie season, but he's very special. Jarrett Allen's a very good, not great, but very good center. Darius Garland is a very good to maybe great point guard. And I think Donovan Mitchell was kind of the scoring input that they needed off the wing that they were hoping Karis LeVert could have given them last year. They legitimately got it this time around in the deal with Utah. And Cleveland, again, 6 seed. Feels really low for them, but I just like their overall talent. We'll have to see how quickly they mesh. But a team that I like even more than them is the Toronto Raptors. I just feel like Toronto is one of those teams that is due for a big year. I think that's very possible they could win 48 to 50 games, being the 5 seed here in the Eastern Conference, maybe even more, maybe 51, 52. They have an all-star player in Fred VanVleet. They have an all-NBA guy in Pascal Siakam. OG Anunoby, in a year, if he stays healthy, he can give you 18 plus points a game. I think Gary Trent Jr. is one of the more underrated players in the league. And they have a guy named Scotty Barnes. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he's somebody who could become very special, especially if he continues to grow offensively. They have 5 players on this team capable of averaging 18 plus points a game, and not just the throwaway 18 points a game on a bad team. I'm talking about really meaningful, competitive basketball, 18 plus points per game across the entire starting lineup. That's almost unheard of. You're looking at about 90 points just per game from your starting lineup. Plus, they added some depth. I like the Otto Porter addition for them as well. And that's really where they edge out Cleveland for me. Cleveland's got the length in the front court with Allen and Mobley and Love. Toronto has it across the entire roster. When you look from their 2 through 5 and some of their bench pieces as well, you look at guys like Precious Achiuwa, Otto Porter Jr., who I just mentioned, and then the one short guy that they really play a ton in, Fred VanVleet's one of the best defensive guards in the league. He's a dog on that end of the floor, and I think he's going to give a lot of other guards problems because with his quickness, he's going to be able to play up so high because of how much length is behind him. It does really empower him as a defender. So Toronto, really like them. And the one thing that I do like about them a little bit more than Cleveland as well, that really differentiated these two for me, there's a little bit more consistency there in Toronto. Nick Nurse has been coaching there longer. And you also have a unit that's played more games together because, yes, Cleveland brought in Donovan Mitchell, definitely improved a ton this offseason, but there's less consistency there because they haven't played with each other as much. So slight edge to Toronto, probably 1 or 2 games separates those two teams, though. Again, I wouldn't be shocked if Cleveland even maybe slipped up into the top 4, but for the sake of this video, I have them as the 6th seed in the Eastern Conference, which leads us to the 4 seed, and maybe a little bit of a shock here. The team that was clearly the best team in the NBA after January 1st was the Boston Celtics. The team right behind them, probably the Dallas Mavericks. The Celtics here, I'm putting at 4th, though, because I think with Ime Udoka out, there's some questions over this franchise. Malcolm Brogdon in, you think, oh, maybe that's a huge addition for them. It is, but at the same time, I think it kind of confuses some things as well. What's going to be his role? Is he going to get consistent minutes? How many of those minutes eats away at Derek White minutes, who was really good for them last year? Does Marcus Smart lose some time? Will there be some locker room controversy? There's just always been something with the Celtics in the last half decade that just doesn't feel right to me. Think about when they went to the conference finals without Gordon Hayward, Kyrie Irving. You think, oh, the next year they're going to come back and maybe even win the finals. And that season just goes completely awry. Are we in store for that this year? They went to the finals, lost. Do they rebound off of that or not? That's really where you have to ask yourself. The whole coaching change, I think it makes it a lot easier to see them only as a 4 seed. A couple days ago, I probably would have looked at them as the likely 3rd seed in the East. But I think I had to knock them down 1 peg here just because there is some turnover and some questions that I still need to see answered before we really get going into the season. Now at 3, the team I really like here is last year's number 1 seed, the Miami Heat. And the Heat fans probably are going to feel like they're getting slept on again. Me putting them at 3. The Heat are a very good team. They're a very good organization. In fact, I would say arguably the best organization in all of basketball. You look at what this team's accomplished. Pat Riley does a phenomenal job building his roster, and Eric Spoelstra is one of the best coaches in the league. Jimmy Butler's got that dog in him. They locked up Tyler Hero, but they are going to miss PJ Tucker. I think that power forward spot is a clear question for me at this point. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if they're one of the teams that really does try and pursue Jay Crowder. I think he would be a great get for them and a great player to bring back into Miami. Obviously played there before. His jump shot's a little inconsistent at times, but I think his defensive presence would be really valuable for them in the front court. But nonetheless, Miami, very talented roster still. A 3 seed is not sleeping on them. This is a team that's going to win 50 plus games if I had to guess. And a team that's going to play really, really good basketball. Again, this East is going to beat up on each other though. So maybe we only have 1 or 2 50-win teams like last year where, you see the East kind of really struggle in terms of getting wins. Then moving into the 2 seed, and I'm going to have the Philadelphia 76ers. And I know some people are really not going to like this because, well, that's what people think is they just based everything on what they saw last. And it's what have you done for me lately? James Harden's going to have a huge year. Okay. James Harden's going to be a beast this season for the Philadelphia 76ers. I wholeheartedly believe that. And no, he did not lose 100 pounds. That's just not the truth. Obviously, he said that at media day. He was being a little facetious, maybe a little exaggerative. But at the end of the day, I think the biggest thing, and I made a video on this after they got bounced from the playoffs. I told everyone, do not sleep on James Harden. He's got time to recover and really rehab and rest up from his hamstring injury, which was clearly bothering him. He went from being a player who could blow by any player in the league at any given moment to not being able to blow by bad defenders. This year, he will be able to do that, and it's going to open up the entire floor for Joel Embiid. It's going to open up more lanes for Tyrese Maxey, who is so good at taking them and really making the most of every opportunity he has. And then Tobias Harris, he's going to get more open shots, which I think is just good for his game as well. And Matisse Thybulle in the preseason game against the Brooklyn Nets seemed really willing to shoot the 3 ball. Now, I'm not sure if it's going to lead to a lot of success, but willingness is at least the first step into becoming a better shooter. If you're unwilling or a little hesitant to shoot threes, it does end up stalling out possessions. I think the Sixers are due for a big year this year. The big fella Joel Embiid's going to have another nice season as well. And I could see them being the 2 seed out in the East. And then, of course, the number 1 seed is the Milwaukee Bucks. And like I said in the beginning of the video, will my 1 seed be my favorite to win it all in the Eastern Conference? Will they represent the East in the NBA Finals? And I think they are easily the safest bet to do so. The Milwaukee Bucks are just a very good team, top to bottom. I would love for them to go out and get Jordan Clarkson from the Utah Jazz. He would be a great addition to what this team doesn't have at this point. I keep my eyes very close on Milwaukee because I think they are arguably the best team in the league. Yeah, and one advantage that they have here, they have arguably the best player in the world in Giannis Antetokounmpo, and he's a player who plays hard every night. It's really rare to get both of those things. It's even harder to get just the best player in the world, and it's hard for him to want to give it his all every night like Giannis does. A walking double-double, some nights a triple-double machine. Milwaukee, they're going to be really good this year. They probably would have won the finals last year or at least made it had Chris Middleton not been out. I don't think there's really any argument to that. And if he comes back healthy this year, I know he's right now in the ramp-up process. He's not completely healthy yet, but assuming he can get back pretty early on this season, they're going to be a force to be reckoned with. Last year, they finished 3rd in the East with Brook Lopez missing pretty much the entirety of the season. Milwaukee at this point, I think they're the favorite to win the Eastern Conference. You'd have to probably agree with that. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Hopefully you guys did enjoy. Again, here's a quick recap. 15 the Magic, 14 Indiana, 13 Detroit, 12 the Knicks, 11 the Wizards, 10 play-in teams. We got the Hornets and Bulls at 8. We got the Nets and Hawks at 7. Then 6 and 5, we got the Cavs and Raptors. And then my top 4 is rounded out by Boston, Miami, Philly, and Milwaukee. Thanks guys so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.